Welcome to the Flaming Shamrock Farm. My name is Mark, and this will be my first video on this channel. I call it a farm because I think it's kind of funny, but I do have chickens, lots of them. Let's take a look. What you're seeing there is probably about 60 to 61 black Australorps, plus I've got a blue Australorp male and female. The blue Australorps were the last remaining survivors of my first flock that was killed by my neighbor's dog about 2 in the morning, which the dog broke down the fence, broke down the chicken coop, and killed 25 of my birds. That was last year, about July, I believe so. Why I got into chickens is mostly just for self-sustainment. That's all I wanted to do, and now I'm seeing kind of the potential benefits of having chickens. Now, let me go over a few things of why I got chickens, and maybe why you want to get chickens. First and foremost, I want self-sustainment. That's primarily coming in the eggs. That is my boy 25 there. He's my 25th bird I got. So I basically wanted to be self-sustaining, and one of the things I've figured is getting birds. And why I started with as many chickens as I have now is because I have myself, my son, and 2 dogs. And I want to maximize the calories and the nutrients that we get, say if it's very hard to get foods here in the future. With that being said, I figured I wanted somewhere approximately 4 dozen eggs a day for, a dozen for me, my son, and 2 dogs. That's probably much on the high side. However, a dozen eggs per person a day is roughly, thank you, is roughly about 1,000 calories, but it's also going to provide you a lot of your daily rebuilding nutrients, as well as a good amount of protein to rebuild your body and protein for energy. It's getting towards the evening, so that's the reason I have these birds now, and why I've plussed up to as much as I have. So that's one thing I do consider. I know people with a backyard flock, that start laying eggs, you might get 3 to 5 eggs a day. If you have 5 birds, probably on average of 3 eggs a day, and that's fine and dandy. But I want to plan for a worst case scenario, and worst case scenario is like I'm not eating a dozen eggs a day right now, but at least I can give friends of mine a dozen eggs here every week if they want them. I'm also selling some of them, a lot of them actually. So, and the selling of the eggs actually helps pay for the feed. Now, point 2, let's get into the costs of these chickens. So, one way or another, if you're going to raise the birds from a chick, they're going to probably cost you about $3 a chick on average, and that's with shipping if you're getting it from one of the big hatcheries like Ideal or McMurray, which I've used both of those, plus I used a couple more hatcheries and whatnot. And so either way, you're going to pay at least about $2.50 a bird. So depending on where you're living at, say if you're in a city and you can have a maximum of 5 birds or 10 birds or 2 or whatever, that's probably where we're going to buy them from. Now there's places like feed stores and so forth like that you could probably buy your chicks locally, but they're probably roughly going to be about the same cost, about $3 a bird. Unless you're going into specialized birds, then the prices start going up. And the specialized, I mean like Jersey Giants, the American breast. Well, American breast is going to cost you about $10 a bird, and things like anyways, other egg-laying birds. You could probably find barnyard mixes for cheaper, because there's just a wide variety of birds that have propagated through somebody's barnyard, and then they hatch those eggs and they come out with chicks with different qualities and traits. My birds are all black Australorps except for 2 blue Australorps I got. They're the survivors of my first flock. And I'm going with them because I want to also maintain the birds themselves. I've got a couple roosters, and I'm going to pick out hens with the best qualities and so forth, and actually breed these birds. Primarily from my own flock, but I can sell them as well. And with so many laying eggs and so many, I got probably approximately 1 rooster for every 10 hens. A lot of my eggs are fertile, so I am incubating and hatching those eggs as well. So the costs associated with the chickens themselves. Okay, so first and foremost, we have probably about $3 a chick. Now realize you're going to have to raise that single chick for about 6 months before it starts laying eggs. Just put on average 6 months before it lays eggs. Now with 60 chickens, I'm going through about 40 to 50 pounds of feed every 3 days. So let's I'll do the math. I'll put it in the bottom of the screen here. But 60 birds, 50 pounds, you know, in 3 days. So we're talking about probably a quarter to maybe upwards of a third of a pound a day of food for fully grown chickens. They eat a little bit less the first couple months, but then about 6 weeks, 8 weeks in, they really ramp up their eating, and then they just become money to poop generators, or money to poop converters, I should say. All right, so that's one cost you want to associate. Another cost you're going to associate with chickens, and I'm only putting this out there for if you want to get into chickens, is just the regular supplies. You're going to have something that's going to have to act as a coop. You don't have to go and buy one of these hundreds or thousands of dollars coops. If you know, I think those are kind of silly. You could probably go and get some free pallets off of Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, and in a weekend build a coop. Now they say that give, you know, your birds like 2 to 3 square feet of coop space per bird. But coop space, I don't think that really applies. I've got 30 birds in a little tiny shed, and I did that because these birds at night, especially when it's cooler outside, they just pile on top of each other anyways. I was like, I got this old shed that's huge. I could probably put another 100 birds in this thing, and the birds still all pile on top of each other. They take up, 30 birds only takes up like this much space, it seems like, over like 2 or 3 rungs. They just pile on top of each other. So plan on the birds, kind of plan on their width, and their weight. You want to make sure it can support the weight when these fully grown birds are probably going to be plan for like 6 to 8 pounds, maybe 7 pounds on average. It's a good planning weight per bird. And they're going to probably be give them about 6 inches across for each bird. And that should give you a good idea of how long to make like a nesting or the perch for them to sleep on. Or you can just have them sleep on the floor too, because birds will just make piles on the floor. But you have to make sure you have to create a structure, and the structure needs to be able to block the wind. It needs to be able to be vented. It needs to be vented to reduce that smell from their poop and urine. But also when it gets warm outside, it needs to be vented. And if it's cool outside, you don't want that condensation building up and freezing on them. So you need venting in there, maybe some light and windows. It doesn't have to be high class windows, so that's a cost you want to associate. Another association you want to do is how are you going to feed them? Now I pretty much use 5-gallon buckets. So you see the 5-gallon bucket there, and it's got the little portholes I drilled in the side. And then the water buckets that I'm using for waters, and kind of a pseudo, not quite working the way I want to, watering system. So you have to plan for that. So plan for $5-6 a bucket. And one bucket, I'm using these 2 buckets out here for feed. Each one holds about half a bag, so about 25 pounds of feed in it. So say if every bird's eating, say a half to a third of a pound a day, and say you have a backyard flock of like 5 birds, you're gonna be a little over a pound a day, and that bucket will hold about 25 pounds of food. So that's gonna last you almost 3 weeks right there. You might not want to put that much food in there, depending on, you know, how moisture laden your area is. You don't want that food to rot in there, but it'll safely stay in there for a week. So waters the same way. You're gonna have to plan for that. Don't be a first-time mom with this stuff, because, you know, what I mean by that is buying the most expensive things for your chickens and all that stuff. And unless you have the money to throw away, then great, whatever, you know. But say you're a little bit on a budget, don't buy all the expensive like little hanging waters and all that stuff, because you know what, a chicken will crap on anything. It doesn't matter. Chickens won't drink from the water that has crap in it, but they will no less crap in the water that, you know, that they're supposed to drink. So make sure it's easily maintainable. Something you can rinse out real quick and fill back up. Same thing with the feeders. And you're primarily covering the feeders up against moisture. So that's some of the associated costs. I think for the buckets, say they're about $5 a piece maybe, or you can probably find them. You want to make sure they're clean buckets, they're not full of old paint and so forth. But you know, however you find your buckets, make sure they have a lid on it. And then the little kits on here are probably about like $5-6 at like an Atwoods, maybe Amazon, whatever, and you can make your own feeders. A third association you're gonna have to make with your chickens, a cost association, is losses. You're going to lose birds. No matter what you do, something is going to try to get them, or sometimes they just wake up and they're dead. Like for instance, this winter I got my second flock. I ordered them 6 months in advance, but McMurray was like way behind, so I got these birds and had them in the brooder, and they were only about 2 or 3 weeks old right when we had like this well below